Welcome back, everyone. Today we are looking at the Amazon Prime TV show of Lord of the Rings and everything we know so far. Recently, production, or I guess filming, I should say, has wrapped. Not production, but filming. And we also have a premiere date. So the premiere date is going to be September 2nd, 2022. And with the wrapping of filming, they also released a teaser photo that you can see on the screen. And this is really exciting for everyone who has been waiting for this since, 2019 is when they first started talking about making a TV show. So it's been a long time coming. So yeah, we've got some little bits of news that we can kind of quickly go over. 2017 was when it was first announced. My mistakes. 2017. That's been a long time, and we're not going to actually see it until 2022. Now, part of the filming did run into some problems with the pauses due to COVID and other production situations that we've talked about before with regards to the stunt workers. But one thing I did want to mention again, I think we've talked about this, but I can't remember. It's the canon, sticking to the canon, and the Tolkien estate having some form of veto power over the direction of the show, which I think is important. Just not only because we do want the continuity to stick to what Tolkien had envisioned, but also we don't want it to be a completely separate entity and almost like a retelling or a new idea of the original Lord of the Rings movies that we saw. We want them to still fit within the same context. So we don't want some backstory that completely wrecks the original trilogy and The Hobbit, for that matter. And if you're not careful with the history of Middle Earth, you do run into problems that might upset the balance there.
Yeah, you really need a team of experts, I guess.
And so yeah, they've got some big Tolkien fans and scholars as supervisors on the show, and I think it's important to get that perspective, because if you're not careful, you can kind of wander into this and sort of come up with some crazy ideas that might be taken in the wrong direction if you're not careful. And Peter Jackson made some questionable decisions himself. His movies turned out great, but there were some scenes that were definitely a bit extra, you could say, that might not be in keeping with what Tolkien had envisioned.
Yeah, he deviated from canon too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know some people are mad about some of the deviations, and other deviations are, I think, for the better. But yeah, I as long as it still feels right, like that's really what they need. Is they need to find the right feeling and tone of the show, because I know that with Game of Thrones, people see that as maybe a template for how to do a fantasy show, but it's going to be difficult to do that style. At least the earlier seasons of a bit more of like a political drama. It would be hard to replicate that in Middle Earth, 1-to-1. There's going to be a lot more factors, but I do think with Middle Earth, you do have, because you have the different races, you have a lot of fun kind of situations that you can find yourself in with these different races and how they're interacting with each other, as well as the overall villain, which we still don't know for sure. We think we have some idea, but that will become more apparent as we get closer to the day. One other thing that should be pointed out is that this is not gonna just be young Aragorn, as some people initially thought, which I mean,
Which would be pretty good.
I think it would be good. I'm not saying it wouldn't be good, but I remember early on they said that it would not cross over to the original trilogy. And so when people thought it was going to be young Aragorn, I wasn't really sure where they got that idea from.
The Adventures of Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, I mean that. I think a lot of people would like to see that. Yeah, so you can see here on the screen that
what if they just put the other, like, the Children of Húrin and the other published books onto the screen?
Yeah, I think that's potentially their end game.
Yeah.
With this, like, so we'll get into the synopsis. I guess we can jump into that right now. I just want to see if there's anything else in this article that I wanted to quickly touch on. Yeah, so let's jump over to the synopsis.
Okay.
Because it does sound like this is actually going to set a foundation to potentially branch out. People are talking about it as almost as if it's like that introduction that we saw in the original trilogy, where you see all this background, and then from there, the events that we see in the movie happen. That's sort of what this sounds like it's going to be. It's going to kind of set up the world. So there's a lot of different areas you can then go and cover. But yeah, so it does sound like this is going to be a bit more of like a historical depiction of early Middle Earth, from the Second Age. And then from there, yes, we can kind of branch off and talk about all sorts of different characters and books that were written by Tolkien. Because there's actually some of his like short story work you could also kind of throw into a little mini TV show as well, and even fit it within Middle Earth, as some people fan fiction kind of do. So yeah, there's actually a lot of potential there, and I think that's why it's important that both the Tolkien estate and the Tolkien scholars, as they're called, are overseeing a lot of that, so that there is continuity there, because it would be terrible for them to write something and then have to take it back because they screwed it up and that doesn't fit with the next set of events that they want to map onto the screen.
Yeah.
And you know, people aren't perfect. I mean, heck, Tolkien himself did that with the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy himself. He wrote a few different ways in which both the finding of the ring happens, as well as the style of the characters that they kind of changed over time to kind of fit a more cohesive narrative between the two stories. So it, you know, unless you have it completely mapped out from start to finish, you run into those problems if you're not looking carefully enough at the work. And that's why I'm really excited that the Tolkien estate is on board and has the veto power. And I think it's really important that they try to stick as closely to the canonized parts of the world that they can. Yeah, the last thing, I guess, is that it's planned to be a minimum of 5 seasons with 8 to 10 episodes per season. But I guess that obviously could change with the success of this show. But just real quick, the synopsis is this epic drama is set thousands of years before the events of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and will take viewers back to an era in which great powers were forged, kingdoms rose to glory and fell to ruin. Unlikely heroes were tested, hope hung by the finest of threads, and the greatest villain that ever flowed from Tolkien's pen threatened to cover all of the world in darkness. Beginning in a time of relative peace, the series follows an ensemble cast of characters, both familiar and new, as they confront the long-feared reemergence of evil to Middle-earth. From the darkest depths of the misty mountains to the majestic forests of the elf capital of Lindon, to the breathtaking island kingdom of Numenor, to the farthest reaches of the map, these kingdoms and characters will carve out legacies that live on long after they are gone. Quick point to note there, the cast of characters that are both new, familiar, and new, we happen to know that a young Galadriel will be in the cast. That has been confirmed, and there's talk of some other characters that we have met along the way as well from the original trilogy. Not Aragorn, but some of the other elves.
I wonder if we'll see more from like Sauron's perspective. I mean, presumably this is the villain, I guess, right?
That is the idea.
Yes.
And I agree. I think giving him a bit more backstory than just being a entity of evil and having
this is the bad guy.
Yeah, which it does work, but because the show is going to try to stretch on many seasons, we're going to need more to dive into that. But yeah, I think I'm excited about that. I mean, all of this information that's been coming out recently about the show it's starting to feel real. Before it was kind of like, are they actually working on this? Like, what's going on? But now we see, we've got this photo, we've got a release date finally, and we keep hearing all this great stuff from the writing perspective. The filming perspective, that's gonna be remain to be seen, because people are still they're nervous about some of the ideas that were put out pretty early on, such as nudity might be involved in this, as well as early on we weren't sure what era they were going to be talking about. As I showed on the screen, even the OneRing.net early on in 2018 said that the show was going to be about a young Aragorn, which completely turned out to be incorrect. So there's a lot of aspects to it that make people nervous, and so now that we're starting to see a lot of it come together, it's starting to feel a lot more real, and the excitement is picking up. I mean, I was already pretty hyped, but now it's getting to dangerous levels.
It'll be I mean, I'm just to stop talking out loud, but it'd be, I'd say I don't think I'd like it, but what if they did like a Marvel type thing where they have like, ooh, let's have an Aragorn series, and then we'll have the Gandalf series, and then we'll have an Elrond series, and then somehow we'll all match them together at the end.
I actually wouldn't hate. I mean, the characters, depending on where they fit into it. For me, I wouldn't hate it. It would have to be done in a way that doesn't make it feel silly. Like I
think it would. I don't know how you do that.
Well, so what I was thinking of, and again, this is me thinking out loud, but the way that the original trilogy works out, where you start off with a group, they get separated, and you're essentially following three different stories.
But I still like jumping back and forth. I wouldn't want it separated.
I see. So you don't mind the characters going off on their own, but you just want to see what everyone's doing at the same time. So you want to see what a scene of Aragorn, and then you want to see a scene of Frodo, like that kind of thing. Yeah, I get that, and it works really well in the original trilogy. I was rewatching Two Towers, and they have a lot of scenes with Frodo and Sam that it's important to keep them in mind as everything else is happening. You could easily, if you just had a movie that was following Aragorn around, you would completely forget what Sam and Frodo are up to, and it would.
And some people, I mean, some of the characters are gonna inevitably be a little bit more boring, I guess.
Sure.
So, but they're still important, right? So if you have a whole series just dedicated to like, well, let's make the old joke, walking. It might not be that interesting, but if you or not interesting to everyone, put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, but if you're able to like have the walking parts, which are important, and then okay, let's throw an action sequence with Aragorn fighting orcs or whatever in
Right.
the next scene to pick it up a bit, then you're able to do that instead of having one series which is constant excitement and another series which is just walking and
True.
hiding.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. They definitely like Jackson definitely uses that strategy in the trilogy because he's able to have a lot of long drawn out walking or talking scenes with characters that aren't in a battle and then cut back to a battle or cut back to some sort of action scene, and it allows him to get both parts across, neither of which comes across as boring or like just for the show of it. Like the battles, I think in part work because they're underscored by the deeper emotional scenes. That's why I think those emotional scenes, they're my favorite parts of the movie, even though I acknowledge that the battle scenes are just spectacular.
But
But
also, I say I like the emotional scenes too. But if I had to watch it constantly with no reprieve,
right,
it'd actually be too heavy.
you're right. You're right. You're right. Having the reprieve and having, for better or for worse, some comedic relief, which you get through Gimli and Pippin. Without those elements, I think the whole thing it needs all the parts. Like you're saying, you need to have the deeper emotional scenes with the comic relief, with the battles to constantly get flow going. That you're always looking forward to the next scene. You're never bored, but you're never bored, but you're never like you never want to stop and just watch one thing. You want to see what's happening with everyone because it's just enough to keep you interested. It's a great way he directed those, and you're right. I think you do kind of need that element.
He pulled it off masterfully.
Mm-hmm. I think there is a way you could sort of do it, but maybe you're right. Maybe it wouldn't be one character, but maybe it would be one moment, like how they're doing the movie about the Rohirrim. Maybe there's a way you can kind of bridge all of that together, where you might have one-off movies that then kind of fit an overall narrative. Because as long as they stay true to it, you can fit it all in.
I think that'd be a fun movie too. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk more about that when we get more information. And that one should be out relatively soon, considering it just got announced, because it's going to be animated, and so it won't be you won't have to go to these locations and stuff. They should be able to crank that out pretty quickly if
depending, if they just do it cheap in Asia.
well, and yeah, just sort of depending on like now that the pandemic restrictions are getting lifted, they might be able to get people back into the studios, and that movie is probably going to be one that's going to be on, at the forefront of the stack of work that they're looking at and saying, hey, we need this one out. But yeah, I'm excited. I look forward to more updates like this. The fact that they've wrapped filming, I'm shocked that is now done. So, it's now just a matter of time once they finish all the post production. It's gonna just keep growing in anticipation.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Hope you guys enjoyed it and liked it. Please subscribe and let us know if there's anything that you've heard about the upcoming TV show that is interesting to you.